Good morning everyone. Today we discuss cardiac cycle, cardiac output and double circulation. What is cardiac cycle? Various events occur during one heartbeat is known as cardiac cycle. Heartbeat, systole and successive diastole together known as heartbeat. Contraction of chambers of heart known as systole. Relaxation of chambers of heart diastole. Systole and successive diastole. Immediately relaxation after systole. Systole means contraction of the chambers of heart. Diastole means relaxation of chambers of heart. Systole and successive diastole together known as heartbeat. The various events occur during one heartbeat is known as cardiac cycle. During one heartbeat, what happens? All chambers of heart undergo one contraction and one relaxation. Cardiac cycle. In most of the human beings, at rest, heartbeat is 72 times per minute. For 1 minute, in most of the human beings, heartbeat is 72 times. What is the duration of one heartbeat? In a minute, 60 seconds. 60 by 72, 0.83 seconds. So that is 0.8 seconds. 0.8 seconds. So within 0.8 seconds, all chambers of heart undergo one contraction and one relaxation. Now we discuss cardiac cycle. cardiac cycle, the various events occur during one heartbeat is known as cardiac cycle. For our convenience, we can study the cardiac cycle under three subheads: atrial systole, ventricular systole, joint to diastole. You already know, in most of the people at rest, heartbeat is 72 times per minute. So what is the duration of one heartbeat? 60 by 72, 0.8 seconds. In 0.8 seconds, all chambers of heart undergo one contraction and one relaxation. So for our convenience, we study the cardiac cycle under three subheads: atrial systole, ventricular systole, joint to diastole. Atrial systole is about 0.1 second. Ventricular systole, atrial systole, contraction of atria 0.1 seconds. Contraction of ventricle 0.3 seconds. Joint to diastole, all chambers of the heart are in relaxed state 0.4 second. Joint to diastole, also known as cardiac diastole. Cardiac diastole. Joint diastole, also known as cardiac diastole. First we discuss the atrial systole. Contraction of atria is known as atrial systole. Wave of contraction started at SA node, and the wave of contraction is in the form of concentrical rings spread all over the atria. Now the atria undergo contraction. When the atria undergo contraction, the wave of contraction enter into the interatrial septum. The whole process completed in 0.1 second. The wave of contraction originated as SA node, spread all over the atria. Atria contract, deoxygenated blood present in the right atrium enter into right ventricle. Oxygenated blood present in the left atria enter into left ventricle. The whole process completed in 0.1 second. Due to atrial systole, each ventricle filled with 30% blood. So, due to atrial systole, only 30% of ventricles filled with blood. The whole process completed in 0.1 second. Next one is ventricular systole, contraction of ventricles. When the atria undergo contraction, the wave of contraction enter into the interatrial septum. From the interatrial septum, the wave of contraction reach the AV node. From AV node, muscle bundle, AV bundle. So next step is from the AV bundle enter into interventricular septum. It divides into two branches: right bundle office, left bundle office. Right bundle office innervate into right atria, right ventricle. Left bundle office innervate into left ventricle. The fine branches arising from the bundle office known as Purkinje fibers. The Purkinje fibers spread the wave of contraction all over the ventricles. So when the ventricles undergo contraction, atria undergo relaxation simultaneously. So due to contraction of ventricle, blood pressure increases in the ventricle. To prevent the backward flow from ventricles into atria, so from the right ventricle the blood may enter into right atrium. From the left ventricle the blood may enter into left atrium through openings. That's why tricuspid and bicuspid valves closes. While closing, they produce the sound known as lub sound. Lub sound is due to contraction of ventricles. Lub sound is due to closure of cuspid valves, tricuspid valves and bicuspid valves. So later, further the ventricles undergo contraction. Now the semilunar valves forcefully open. The one semilunar valve present at the base of pulmonary arch, another semilunar valve present at the base of left systemic arch. the deoxygenated blood present in the right ventricle enters into pulmonary arch. Oxygenated blood present in the left ventricle enters into left systemic arch. The whole process completed in 0.3 seconds. Ventricular systole. So second one is ventricular systole. During ventricular systole, the wave of contraction present in the interatrial septum reach the AV node. From AV node, AV bundle. From AV bundle, bundle of his. Right bundle of his and left bundle of his. Right bundle of his enter into right ventricle. Left bundle of his into left ventricle. From the bundle of his, fine branches arises known as Purkinje fibers. The Purkinje fibers spread the wave of contraction all over the ventricle. Now the ventricles undergo contraction. At the same time, atria relaxed. Due to contraction of ventricle, pressure increases. To prevent the backward flow of blood from the ventricles into atria, cuspid valves closes. Tricuspid and bicuspid valves closes. While closing, the cuspid valves produce the sound that is known as lub sound. Lub is the first heart sound. It is due to contraction of ventricle and closure of cuspid valves. Further, the ventricles undergo contraction. Semilunar valves open. From the right ventricle, deoxygenated blood enter into pulmonary arch through semilunar valve. From the left ventricle, oxygenated blood enter into left systemic arch through semilunar valve. The whole process is completed in 0.3 seconds. Next one is cardiac diastole. Now the ventricles undergo relaxation. Already atria are in relaxed state. That's why it is known as cardiac diastole or joint diastole. During joint diastole, all chambers of the heart are in relaxed state. So now the ventricles undergo relaxation. At the time already atria are in relaxed state. That's why it is known as cardiac diastole or joint diastole. Due to relaxation of ventricle, blood pressure decreases. At the time, the blood present in the arches may enter into respective ventricle. To prevent this, semilunar valves closed. While closing, semilunar valves produce the sound that is known as dub sound. Dub or dub sound. The dub sound is the second sound. Second sound is due to closure of semilunar valves. Further, the ventricles relax. Now the cuspid valves open. Blood from atria enter into ventricles. The whole process completed in 0.4 seconds. During joint diastole, each ventricle filled with 70% blood. So during joint diastole, each ventricle filled with 70% of blood. During ventricular systole, during atrial systole, each ventricle filled with 30% of blood. So this is about cardiac cycle. So duration of atrial systole 0.1 second, ventricular systole 0.3 seconds and joint diastole 0.4 seconds. What about atrial diastole? Only atria. During cardiac cycle, atria contracted only 0.1 second. In the remaining time, atria is in relaxed state only. When the ventricles undergo contraction and all chambers are in relaxed state, at the time ventricles are in atria are in relaxed state. That's why atrial diastole is 0.7 seconds. You already know cardiac cycle duration is 0.8. Atrial systole 0.1, ventricular systole 0.3, cardiac diastole 0.4. Total 0.8 seconds. Out of 0.8 seconds, atria are in contracted state only 0.1. In the remaining time, atria are in relaxed state only. That's why atrial diastole is equal to 0.7 seconds. Next one, ventricular diastole. During joint diastole, both atria ventricles are in relaxed state. That means in joint diastole 0.4 second, ventricles are in relaxed state only. In addition, when the atria undergo contraction, at the time also ventricles undergo relaxation. That's why ventricular diastole is equal to joint diastole plus when the atria undergo contraction, that is 0.5 seconds. So ventricular diastole is 0.5 seconds, atrial diastole is 0.7 seconds. So cardiac cycle. So once again, cardiac cycle. The various events occur during one heartbeat is known as cardiac cycle. One heartbeat means systole and successive diastole, known as one heartbeat. Systole, contraction of chambers of heart. Diastole, relaxation of chambers of heart. Per minute, in most of the people at rest, heartbeat is 72. For 60 seconds, 72 heartbeats. What is the duration of one heartbeat? 60 by 72. That is 0.8 seconds. 0.8 seconds. That is the cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle. We discuss cardiac cycle in three subheads: atrial systole, ventricular systole, cardiac diastole. Atrial systole, contraction of atria known as atrial systole. Duration of atrial systole 0.1 second. Wave of contraction originated at the SCA node and it spread all over the atria in the form of concentrical rings. Now the atria undergo contraction. Deoxygenated blood from right atrium enters into right ventricle. Oxygenated blood from left atrium enters into left ventricle. The whole process completed in 0.1 second. Due to atrial systole, each ventricle filled with 30% blood. Next one is ventricular systole. When the atria undergo contraction, the wave of contraction enter into interatrial septum. From interatrial septum, AV node receive the wave of contraction. You already know AV node act as a relay station. It convey the received wave of contraction to ventricle via muscle bundle. From the AV node, wave of contraction enter into AV bundle. From AV bundle, bundle of his, right bundle of his, left bundle of his, right bundle of his innervate into right ventricle, left bundle of his innervate into left ventricle. Fine branches arising from the ventricles known as Purkinje fibers. The Purkinje fibers spread the wave of contraction. Now the ventricles undergo contraction. When the ventricles undergo contraction, atria simultaneously means at a time undergo relaxation. Due to contraction of ventricle, blood pressure increases in the ventricle. To prevent the backward flow from ventricles into atria, cuspid valves closes. While closing, cuspid valves produce the sound, that is lub sound. Lub sound is the first heart sound. It is due to closure of cuspid valves or atrioventricular valves, and it is due to contraction of ventricles. Further, the ventricles undergo contraction. Now the semilunar valves open. From the right ventricle, deoxygenated blood enter into pulmonary arch. From the left ventricle, oxygenated blood enters into left systemic arch. The whole process completed in 0.3 seconds. Next one is cardiac diastole, also known as joint diastole. All chambers are in relaxed state, that is cardiac diastole. The ventricles undergo relaxation. Already atria in relaxed state. That's why it is known as cardiac diastole. Due to relaxation of ventricle, pressure decreases in the ventricle. So to prevent the backward flow from the arches into ventricle, prevent the backward flow of blood from pulmonary arch into right ventricle, prevent the backward flow from left systemic arch into left ventricle, semilunar valves closes. While closing, they produce the sound, dub sound. Dub sound is the second sound. It is due to closure of semilunar valves and it is due to relaxation of ventricles. So further the ventricles undergo relaxation, cuspid valves open, blood from atria enter into ventricle. During joint diastole, each ventricle filled with 70% of blood. During atrial systole, each ventricle filled with 30% blood. You already know the duration of cardiac cycle is 0.8 seconds. Atria are in contracted state only 0.1 second. In the remaining time, atria are in relaxed state. That's why atrial diastole duration is 0.7 seconds. During joint diastole, both atria and ventricles are in relaxed state. In atrial systole, atria are in contracted state. At the time also, ventricles are relaxed. So, the ventricular diastole is equal to 0.5 seconds. So, this is about cardiac cycle. Now, we discuss the cardiac output. Cardiac output. Cardiac output. Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle. Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per heartbeat is stroke volume. Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is known as cardiac output. Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is known as cardiac output. With the help of formula, we can calculate the cardiac output. Stroke volume into number of heartbeats. Stroke volume into number of heartbeats. So with the help of formula stroke volume and number of heartbeats, we can calculate the cardiac output. Stroke volume is 70 ml and the number of heartbeats at rest in most of the people 72. What is the stroke volume? Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per heartbeat is known as stroke volume. During contraction of ventricle, from right ventricle 70 ml of blood enter into pulmonary arch. From the left ventricle 70 ml of blood enter into left systemic arch. What is stroke volume? Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per heartbeat is stroke volume. Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is cardiac output. So we can calculate the cardiac output with the help of formula stroke volume into number of heartbeats. Stroke volume is 70 ml, number of heartbeats at rest in most of the people 72. 70 ml into 72, 5040 ml of blood. That means blood volume in human is generally 5 liters. So 5 liters given in the textbook, generally 5 to 6 liters. So this is about cardiac output. So cardiac output is not constant. Why our heartbeat is not 72, at rest only 72. If you work, so if you perform any work, the heartbeats, number of heartbeats increases. Number of heartbeats increases, that's why cardiac output is not constant. But in athletes, stroke volume also not constant. But in athletes, the stroke volume also more, 80 ml, 90 ml, 75 ml. In normal people only, stroke volume is 70 ml. But in other people, stroke volume is 70 ml. But in athletes, stroke volume is more than 70. So in athletes, both stroke volume and the number of heartbeats are not constant. So cardiac output varies. But in all human beings also, cardiac output is not constant. Reason is the number of heartbeats not constant. Number of heartbeats not constant. Now we discuss. Once again I repeat cardiac output. What is cardiac output? Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute is known as cardiac output. With the help of formula, we can calculate the cardiac output. Stroke volume into number of heartbeats. What is stroke volume? Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per heartbeat is known as stroke volume. Stroke volume is 70 ml. Number of heartbeats at rest in most of the people 72. 70 ml into 72, 5040 ml blood. But number of heartbeats are not constant. So that's why cardiac output is not constant. But in athletes, stroke volume also not constant. In some athletes 75, 80, 90. That's why cardiac output is not constant. Now we discuss double circulation. Double circulation. If blood enter into heart twice before it is circulated to various parts of the body is known as double circulation. If blood enter into heart twice before it is circulated to various parts of the body is known as double circulation. One time blood enter into right chambers of heart as deoxygenated blood. Second time same blood enter into left side of the heart as oxygenated blood. Finally, it sent out to various organs. So, blood enter into heart twice before it is circulated to various parts of the body is known as double circulation. One time into right chambers, right atrium, right ventricle as deoxygenated blood. Second time as oxygenated blood in the left atrium and left ventricle is known as double circulation. Now we discuss pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. What is pulmonary? Pulmonary means lungs. Circulation of blood from heart to lungs, lungs to heart is known as pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary means lungs. Blood circulated to lungs means deoxygenated blood. Circulation of deoxygenated blood from heart to lungs and circulation of oxygenated blood from lungs to heart is known as pulmonary circulation. What is systemic circulation? Systemic means various organs. Circulation of blood from heart to various organs and from various organs to heart. From heart, the blood circulated to various organs is oxygenated. So, systemic circulation means circulation of deoxygenated, systemic circulation, circulation of oxygenated blood from left ventricle to various organs and circulation of deoxygenated blood from various organ to heart is known as systemic circulation. So, for 3 marks question, you have to explain various organs in pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation. For CET and NEET, they may ask, arrange the following organs in a sequence regarding pulmonary circulation or systemic circulation. That's why with the help of diagram, we discuss pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. So pulmonary circulation start in the right ventricle. Right ventricle contain deoxygenated blood. The deoxygenated blood present in the right ventricle enter into pulmonary arch. Pulmonary arch. From the pulmonary arch divides into pulmonary arteries. Pulmonary arch divides into two pulmonary arteries. Right pulmonary artery supply blood to right lung, left pulmonary artery supply blood to left lung. In the lungs, deoxygenated blood become oxygenated. Now, through pulmonary veins, oxygenated blood released into left atrium through separate apertures known as pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation, transport of deoxygenated blood from heart to lungs and transport of oxygenated blood from lungs to heart is known as pulmonary circulation. So right ventricle contain deoxygenated blood. The deoxygenated blood enter into pulmonary arch. Pulmonary arch divides into two pulmonary arteries, right pulmonary and left pulmonary. Pulmonary arteries supply deoxygenated blood to lungs. In lungs, the deoxygenated blood become oxygenated. From each lung, two pulmonary veins arise. In this manner, four pulmonary veins pour the oxygenated blood into left atrium. Pulmonary circulation begin in the right ventricle, end in the left atrium. Systemic circulation, transport of oxygenated blood from heart to various organs and transport of deoxygenated blood from various organ to heart is known as systemic circulation. Systemic circulation begin in the left ventricle. When the ventricles undergo contraction from the left ventricle, oxygenated blood enter into left systemic arch. Left systemic arch. So, systemic circulation, transport of oxygenated blood from left ventricle to various organs. From various organs, deoxygenated blood circulated to heart is known as systemic circulation. Systemic circulation begin in the left ventricle. When the ventricles undergo contraction, oxygenated blood present in the left ventricle enters into left systemic arch. Left systemic arch present on the ventral surface. From the ventral surface, left systemic arch travel to dorsal surface. Now it is known as dorsal aorta. From the dorsal aorta, several paired and unpaired arteries arise. They supply blood to various organs. So from various organs, the veins collect the blood. All veins unite. As a result, two main veins are formed: superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Plural is vena cavae. Vena cavae. Superior vena cavae collect blood from head, thorax, and limbs, hands. Inferior vena cavae collect blood from legs and abdomen. Now, this deoxygenated blood enter into right atrium through separate aperture, opening of superior vena cava, opening of inferior vena cava. So, systemic circulation begin in the left ventricle, end in the right atrium. Left ventricle, left systemic arch, dorsal aorta. The branches of dorsal aorta supply blood to various organs. From various organs, veins collect the blood. All these veins unite. Two main veins are formed, collectively known as vena cava. One is superior vena cava, another inferior vena cava. Superior and inferior vena cava through separate apertures release the blood into right atrium. So in this manner, systemic circulation begin in the left ventricle, end in the right atrium. Pulmonary circulation begin in the right ventricle, end in the left atrium. So this is about double circulation. Double circulation. Now we discuss hypertension disorders. High blood pressure. Hypertension or high blood pressure. High blood pressure means 140 by 90. 140 is systolic pressure. 90 is diastolic pressure. Systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. Normal blood pressure is 120 by 80. 120 systolic pressure, 80 diastolic pressure. What is blood pressure? Pressure created by blood on the wall of artery known as blood pressure. Artery divides into two arterioles. Arteriole divides into blood capillaries. Same blood capillaries unite, venule is formed. Two venules unite, vein is formed. Artery, arteriole, blood capillary, venule, vein. One artery divides into two arterioles. Each arteriole divides into blood capillaries. In arterial system, blood flows from greater diameter to lesser diameter. That's why blood pressure increases. In venous system, so several blood capillaries unite, venule is formed. Two venules unite, one vein is formed. Venous system or veins begin with blood capillaries, arteries ends with blood capillaries. In veins, blood flows from lesser diameter to greater diameter. That's why we never discuss blood pressure in veins. Once again, each artery divides into two arterioles. Each arteriole ends with blood capillaries. Same blood capillaries unite, venule is formed. Two venules unite, one vein is formed. In arterial system, blood flows from greater diameter to lesser diameter. That's why blood pressure increases. In venous system, the blood flows from lesser diameter to greater diameter. That's why we never discuss blood pressure in veins. So blood pressure means only in the arteries. So what is blood pressure? Pressure created by blood on the wall of artery known as blood pressure. Normal blood pressure is 120/80. What is 120? Systolic pressure. 80 diastolic pressure. Systole means contraction. When the ventricles undergo contraction, the pressure created by blood on the wall of artery 120. When the ventricles undergo relaxation, at the time the pressure created by blood on the wall of artery is diastolic pressure. What is hypertension? In any person, blood pressure is 140/90 or more than 140/90, known as hypertension. So then how they estimate? With the help of sphygmomanometer. Name of the instrument, sphygmomanometer. Sphygmomanometer is used to test the blood pressure. In which artery they test the blood pressure? Brachial artery. Brachial artery. Arteries are deep seated. All superficially present blood vessels are veins. When compared to other arteries, brachial artery is superficially present. Brachial artery. They measure the blood pressure in brachial artery. If the blood pressure is 140/90, known as high blood pressure. High blood pressure damages the brain, kidney. The main reason for high blood pressure, consumption of salt. In some cases, hereditary, their parents suffering from high blood pressure and their progeny also suffer from high blood pressure. The main reason for high blood pressure is consumption of more salt. If you consume more salt, so concentration of blood increases. So that's why blood keep some more water in the blood. So consumption of salt is the main reason for increase of blood pressure. Sphygmomanometer is used to test the blood pressure. In which artery they test the blood pressure? Brachial artery. In the previous chapter we discussed reserpine is extracted from raw Wolffia vomitoria and is used in the treatment of high blood pressure. So tomorrow we discuss other diseases, blood coagulation.